Teachers of Reddit, what was the most obvious teacher crush someone had on you? I had a student who had a rough life. Mum pretty much abandoned him, and grandma was raising him by pawning him off to family on the weekends. I knew he was going to have a rough life if someone didn't step in and let him know he mattered. He asked me one day how I would know if someone loved me. I jokingly replied that person would bring me coffee in the morning. A few days later he came into the gym with a huge smile and a cup of gas station coffee. He walked right up and handed it to me along with a bag of creamers and sugars. He said he didn't know how I liked my coffee, so he grabbed one of each. He saved his allowance and asked his grandma to leave for school early so he could stop by the gas station. The next year he brought me a coffee mug so I could remember him when I drank my morning coffee. That kid will always have my heart. That is so sweet. When I was playing Hamlet in the school play, and the girl playing Ophelia got stage fright at the last minute, so the drama teacher had to costume up and sub in for her, on her knees in a low-cut bodice, hanging onto my leg, and screaming, "Oh, help him, you sweet heavens." I got a boner in front of 500 people. Nice. Not a teacher, but this one girl had such a blatantly huge crush on my film studies teacher when we were 15-16. She herself was mixed race and would ask the poor guy if he preferred white chocolate, dark chocolate or color caramel. Winker face. Safe to say that was awkward for everyone present in the room. I dislike all of them. In the days of MSN, I got a chat invite from someone who had the same last name as me. I assumed it was a relation, but they didn't say anything, and so I left for a bit to eat. I came back and saw a couple more people had been added to the chat and saw they'd been talking about me. I realized they were students because they referred to me as Miss. They were teasing one of the others for his crush on me, and he was defending my massive butt as hot. I can vouch for that. Massive asses are hot. I taught pre-K and one student always wanted to be around me and would pretend to slip up and call me mom. He saw my phone had a screensaver of me and my at the time boyfriend, and he got all mad and said I should break up with him. LOL. Kids are adorable. I doubt he'll remember me in a few years. If it's anything like my 3rd grade crush, he will never forget. Working as a substitute teacher, I had a 6th grader hand in a poem that went, "Roses are red, violets are blue. I am single, how about you?" She also worked her phone number into another poem she handed in. I had a crush on my teacher in high school. After I graduated, I asked him out to lunch with my best friend and me. He agreed. We met up a few days later and he walked in with his husband. That was a rough day for me. NGL, that was a power move though. He knew what you wanted and he knew how to tell you no without any awkward conversation. Back when I was teaching preschool, 3-year-olds don't do subtle. He always wanted to hold my hand when we went on walks, to sit next to me at circle time, and just to look at me with puppy eyes. It was adorable, but at the same time it was a relief when he grew out of it. Years later, I was teaching an all-boy class at a vocational high school and was lucky enough to get a bright new teacher on a Comenius exchange to co-teach the class with me. She was also quite attractive and the boys reacted. Since it was an English language class, I got a kick out of doing my best Mary Poppins impression. "Close your mouth, please. We are not a codfish." 3-year-olds don't do subtle. When I was 3, I proposed to a 3-year-old neighbor girl. She ran away screaming. I had a kid ask me to marry him the other day. Then he proceeded to say I would be way too old for him by the time he was old enough to get married. The best day of your life and the worst day of your life. Kids are so cruel with their marriage proposals. I teach at a university and students ask me out. I had a student once ask me out in front of the class while I was teaching, but I think it was more a power move than anything else. Had a teacher in high school who had the same thing happen to her. She looked at the kid and said, "Honey, I teach all day, don't have time to teach at night too." That shut him down pretty quickly. During college I was teaching a lesson about money and having a job to kindergartners and opened with, "So how do you guys think I got the money to buy candy? Small blonde child. Because you're cute." Supervising teacher in the back of the room just starts laughing. LOL. I'm not a teacher, but I do have a story of when I was a HS student. It was my senior year and I had a crush on this young history teacher. He would come on model on trips with us as a chaperone so he knew who I was. It was my birthday and he heard from a different teacher across the hall. He said happy birthday to me, and my response was thanks, I'm 18. I blurted it out very quickly and realized literally the second it left my mouth how inappropriate it was. His response, well, are you registered to vote? Kids and teenagers always announce their age on their birthdays. The teacher may not have noticed what you think they noticed. I teach at a local university and I've had a few, including one who used to sketch me during class, one who tried to put his arm around me, etc. The most obvious and persistent was a student who used to follow me after class every day, show up at my office just to talk, and spent all of his time attempting to look down my shirt. He ended up dropping out of college halfway through the semester. Have sketch teachers. Definitely did not have a crush on them though. My first year, teaching high school, the AV department made an end of the year tape for the students every year as a keepsake. That year they allowed a senior to profess her love to me on the tape. I didn't know she had done this and they had allowed it until it played over their AV system to the whole school. Needless to say I was P, but I couldn't make too much of a stink because I didn't want a lot of attention drawn to it, and they weren't going to take it out. Suckers. I had a student ask me if I was married. Yes. This was followed by, but are you happily married? I started teaching way too young. You gotta admire that dedication. I taught grade 7 and one kid in particular took a liking to me. It wasn't a crush per se, it came across more as an elementary school fascination with the teacher. He would raise his hand constantly during class to answer questions, and when students were doing work he would raise his hand constantly to ask me random questions about my life. He had a few favorite questions like what song is stuck in your head right now or what's your fiance's name. One time he very excitedly told me he had seen me at Costco, and I hadn't been to Costco that week, so he clearly was seeing me in places I wasn't. Sounds like a crush to me. I taught preschool and the owner's grandson would tell everyone we were going to get married once he was done with first grade. He even gave me mittens with hearts on them because hearts are for love. He's in middle school now and doesn't remember me. I teach preschool too. It was my last day at a school because I was moving. One of the 4-year-olds announced to everyone that he knew where I was moving. When asked, he explained that Miss Pumpkin Pasties was moving in with him as we were getting married. News to me. When I left, my computer unlocked and a student put naked pictures of herself as my wallpaper and a post-it with her number. Holy frick. Let's just lace his computer with child P in public view. Jesus. Could have been a bully though actually. Bit of a different one this. Parents' evening. Single mum comes in to talk about her son. Her youngest daughter, probably about 4, runs in, jumps on my knee and exclaims, my mummy says you're going to be our new daddy. Longest parents' evening of my life. I'm not a teacher, but when I was in college we had a pretty sexy biology professor. Not only was he physically attractive but he seemed to be a pretty cool person. Most of the women in his classes were pretty smitten and I won't pretend like I wasn't one of them. However, I went back to college after a few years off, so I was 26 in rooms of 18-21-year-olds. 5 years may not seem like a huge difference, but holy crap, it was. His office was connected to the lab, and one day while myself and some other students were doing work in the lab, this one girl was quite loudly proclaiming the things she would do to him, including saying things like, I don't care if he's married with kids. He was sitting in his office at the time and I said, you need to keep your ovaries in check. He can definitely hear you right now. She said she didn't care and she hoped it tempted him. It made me uncomfortable for him. I can't imagine how he must have felt. He usually came out of his office to chat with us or help us, but not that day. This reminded me of my college bio lab instructor. All lab instructors were grad students, so he was young and very attractive. I remember having the biggest crush on him. A year later, I matched with him on Tinder. I lost a lot of weight in a year, so I'm not sure he recognized me. I never asked, but he asked to be frick buddies, lol. A student who had a crush on me wrote a straightforward proposition and asked another teacher to deliver it to me. This teacher was a mentor of sorts to the student, so you'd think he'd do something wiser and more responsible than what he actually did, which was deliver the note and threaten me with some form of unspecified violence if I told anyone. So I informed the principal, and both the student and teacher were transferred to other schools. Not a teacher but used to be a Cub Scout guide. One of our boys, 10-yo, had a crush on my adjutant, 16-yo girl. He swore she will be his girlfriend one day, and was strangely serious about it. We laughed it off, and forgot about it. Years went by. The boy became a man, joined the army, came back, went to medical university, got buff and handsome, and reached out to his old crush on Facebook. They got married last May, and have a baby girl. Dang that ending though. A girl in my graduating class ended up marrying a teacher baseball coach who taught at my school. Pretty sure they are still together with child. Ren. They were engaged very shortly after graduation. Pretty sure all her friends knew. If social media had been a thing back then it would have been outed. Not a teacher, a student. Back in middle school, 16 years ago, I had a crush on a teacher of mine, although I wasn't aware of the severity of it until it was too late. Around Halloween time we were supposed to write a poem about a teacher of ours. I of course procrastinated until the night before and then realized that I lost the sheet with the contents of what the poem is supposed to be. All I knew was that it had to be about a teacher. So I chose my crush unbeknownst to me. The next day I show up to class and try and turn in my paper where I was informed by my teacher crush that we were going to be reading our poems in front of 2 classes, separated by a sliding wall half the time. As other students read theirs I quickly realized these poems were supposed to be Halloween related. I panicked because mine didn't fit the criteria and had nothing to do with Halloween. It wasn't until I was reading mine aloud that I felt the sudden rushing aha moment of what I had just confessed to the entire 2 classes. Both teachers from either side of the wall and the entire student body watched in stupefied horror as I read it aloud, voice and hands shaking. Too late to turn back. It went like this to start. Mr. Hopper, Mr. Hopper, I have a dog named Copper. Mr. Hopper, Mr. Hopper, you make my eyes popper. I don't remember the rest. When I finally looked at Mr. Hopper, his entire face and neck was red with embarrassment. We never spoke of it ever, and I avoided him like the plague. I'm sure it was the same around. If I was in that situation I'd just tear up my paper and take the F. Not me, but when I was in school a teacher found another student's very graphic erotic fan fiction about him. Ended up having a conference with her parents, counselor, and principal. Girl got transferred to a different classroom but tried to shoot up the school with what she thought was her brother's secret gun. It was a toy he modified to look real. Hadn't seen or heard about her since, but before I graduated the school made it a rule that staff were not to be depicted in any creative work, and if any such work was found the owner was looking at suspension. My older boss friend proposed to our 60+ teacher every day. She always laughed about it. Cue the entire football team picking up on this and proposing to her before every game. For about 3 years. Cue. Though the team may have queued up on cue. Starting teaching high school English at 21 in the early 90s. Very religious. Student wrote me an anonymous letter explaining that she believed that God had put her in my class because we were meant to be together. Figured it out by handwriting. Reported it. It was last days of the school year before she graduated. So I don't think I ever had to deal with her being in my class again because of finals or something. You never know. There was a Catholic all-girls school where I grew up that had several teachers married to former students. Actually, yeah, it's pretty weird. I swear the first year I was teaching I passed 2 students in the hall and the one said, "That's the new teacher," and his friend said, "Yeah, he's so hot." Were they both boys or girls? Not a teacher, but I had a crush on a lunch lady while I was in the 1st grade, and I would always say, "Hey, good looking, what you got cooking?" She knew what was up. When I was in high school I saw a handwritten letter on my English teacher's desk. While waiting to speak with her, other kids were hanging around the desk, but I think I was the only one to spot and read the letter. It was sitting among piles of paperwork, partially obscured, but not hidden, so I suspect even the teacher hadn't seen it yet. Paraphrasing, but the letter went something like this. Mrs. S. I love your curves. I can't stop thinking about you. You are my favorite teacher because you have a great smile. I want to touch you and kiss you. There was more, but I didn't pull the letter from the pile to read it because I realized how it would look for the teacher, and I was scared other people would see it. She was my favorite teacher at the time, and I suspected this note was very much not welcome. Judging from her personality, very chill, friendly, professional teacher, and the fact that it wasn't hidden, you'd think a teacher-student relationship would be a little less obvious. I never told my friends. I never mentioned it to the teacher. I just kept quiet. I suspected she was the victim here, not the student, and I wasn't about to start any gossip about her, potentially getting her fired. A few years later, another student was kicked out of school for sexually harassing a new art teacher. It was so bad, she had anxiety attacks and sped from the room to a neighboring class to be with another teacher and escape him. He was finally kicked out when he sent her unsolicited dong pics. He got her number without her permission, and she took it to the school board and police. I suspect it was the same kid who wrote the letter, but I have no proof. I was invited to my first grade teacher's wedding. The whole class was, and wept the entire time. I wonder if she could tell that I loved her. Wow, she must have loved you guys a lot for inviting all of you to her wedding. The one where she kept staring at me in class and invited me to her birthday party and we had sex that night. I teach languages to adults, by the way. I read this and was like, whoa okay. A student once gave me a homemade sugar cookie in the shape of a heart with nice butt written on it for Valentine's Day. Please tell me you kept it as the weirdest trophy ever. Not a teacher, but I was accused of having a teacher crush on my math tay in college. I'm okay with math, but I have to put in a lot of practice and I go to office hours. I'm very visual and I really like to just watch math problems being done. I'm also very much a soundboard learner and I talk myself through problems or talk with others through problems. My tay figured this out and he went out of his way to help me. It also just so happened that he was the tay for various math courses while I was in college, and I managed to get him as a tay for all but one of my math classes during my entire undergrad. My last class I had with him, I wrote him an absolute stellar review because he deserved it for helping me get through calc to linear algebra. That summer, I actually worked with him in a program where he taught math and I taught programming. I sat in on his first class and he was telling his students he got this amazing review this past year, and yep, it was my review. I called him the Chuck Norris of TAs and he quoted that line and others I used, so I know it was mine. I gasped and went, hey, I wrote that review, and I could see he was genuinely appreciative I spent the time to write such a review, but then the whole class went, someone has a crush on the teacher. I was so embarrassed. Anyways, I had those freshmen for 8 AM introductory programming and I made their quizzes extra hard compared to the other sections. The Tay and I were drunk grade papers with the other teachers, and man, even drunk, math majors still talk about math. Had a 4th grader in my after school program, where they called me Mr. Troy. We're out on the playground one afternoon and I noticed her zoning out in my general direction. Asked her what was up and she goes, oh, just thinking of what it would be like to be Mrs. Troy. That was a long conversation. First year of teaching, I had a female student say, I know you're married, I could be your pet, you could even keep me on a leash. Immediately excused myself, went to the principal, and the next year switched from high school to middle school. Miss me with that crap. Ladies and gentlemen, always remember to keep the door open when talking to students and join your union. I'm a toddler teacher. One of the parents came in one day and told me she asked if her son had a girlfriend at school. He said yeah, it's Miss Goldfish, don't bounce. He was about to turn 2 and I just couldn't help but laugh when she told me. Not exactly a crush, but my dad told me one of his classmates way back when got in a lot of trouble for his comeback to a female teacher giving him grief over his getting a 69 on the midterms. A little boy with Asperger's gave me a note with "You're gorgeous" written on it. He was 8 or 9, asked me for a high five and then proceeded to grip my hand in his. I had some students who would just daily ask me about my marriage or tell me I looked beautiful, but I also have had students who were total creeps. My one student, 8th grade, was completing an assignment where he had to write a letter to his future self. The last line was, "And if Mrs. Norride still looks this good, bend her over a table for me and have your way." How to get expelled in 20 words or less. A student ejaculated into a Ziploc bag and put it on my desk. He told me it was from him masturbating while thinking of me. Reason 92,626,283,360. To that I am no longer teaching. Obligatory, not a teacher, because I was the student. 11th grade history teacher. He and I had a great relationship and could banter off of each other like nobody's business. For example, I remember on Halloween, I had a shirt on that said "Good Witch" and was also wearing a witch's hat. We'd been having a debate about the looming smoking ban in our city. I hadn't really been paying attention, was too busy texting. Someone said "pee me off," so I snapped into the debate and shut the other person down. My teacher, we'll call him Mr. H, goes, "Come on caramel cats, don't be a," cocked his head to the side, which, one night I dadded him on Facebook. The next day in class, he says, "Saw you added me on Facebook, but I don't add people under 21. Proceeded to size me up and say, "So add me when you're 21. After all this occurred, whenever we had the mobile Mac lab in our classroom, instead of doing my work, I would email him and we'd banter back and forth. It was good times. I also had him for senior year economics. I made sure I got him instead of the other econ teacher. Mr. H knew this well in advance. On the last day of my senior year, I just hung out in his classroom with him. Remember how I said he told me to add him when I was 21? He ended up adding me on my 21st birthday. Fast forward 4 years after we became Facebook friends. I was living on the East Coast and he was still teaching in my Midwestern hometown. My friends were discussing coming to said hometown and doing brewery tours. I remembered this teacher ran brewery tours throughout the year, so I hit him up. First words out of his mouth, "Oh, I'm so glad you actually have friends now." The banter was still there. We ended up talking for a few hours while I was getting progressively more and more drunk. This resulted in my dumbass telling him, 7 years after I graduated, that I wanted him to frick my brains out. I'm now living back in my hometown, and I've only seen him once, and did not receive the D. Not for lack of want, I don't think. More lack of wanting to lose his job. Not a teacher, but a student. I was in a psych class in my senior year of high school and had an admittedly attractive male teacher for the class. We're in the library one day to work on a presentation project, and I go to the printer to pick something up. This girl, who was clearly a sophomore, career school, all sophomores had purple polos, asked if I was in the teacher's class, and I said yes. She then told me, "You know, he's really hot, like I'd really like to frick him, but if you tell anyone, I'll fricking kill you." I just got out of the printer room with my work as fast as possible and told the teacher, who was horrified. That girl had looked dead serious and terrifying when she said that, and while I was 17 at the time, I was still scared. If you're reading this, Mr. Boggs, I hope you and your wife are doing awesome. I bet she got shocked when Mr. Boggs told her that he was married to his wife. XD. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.